Welcome to the Alternative Healers Coffee Chat. I am Janelle Mulligan, and I aim to empower people to journey through life with dignity, self-awareness, and authenticity, fostering constructive change, choice, and connection. The purpose of this podcast is to acquaint listeners with different modalities and empower them on their healing journey. Joining me today is Nicolle. She has many talents, and the ones that jumped out at me were peacemaker and healer-in-law. She is passionate about transforming the world one mindful moment at a time, using her skills as a certified mindfulness instructor, lawyer, and mediator to support others with nonviolent energy and communication, healing the legal system and bringing compassion and kindness to the law and to the world. Thank you for joining me, Nicolle.
Thank you so much, Janelle, for having me, and again for that beautiful introduction. It's not very often that I read the stuff that other people see about me, but I listen to that and I think, wow, that's the type of person I want to be. And whoa, hang on, that is me, And so, thank you for reminding me, and so beautifully. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, and it's so nice to see someone else that is encompassing all parts of themselves to bring to this world and to this community. As we've talked about, before we started recording, the world has such a negative connotation when it comes to lawyers and law and what that practice looks like, the zealous advocacy, going for blood, taking kneecaps out. So when this movement started, and from my awareness, it started about 20 or more years ago, really taking traction with things like collaborative law and conscious contracts. It is showing this metamorphosis of becoming much more human-based. And I would love to hear kind of what was your path to getting to being a healer in law, and what is your vision for the legal system and for law and people going forward?
That's such a big question. So I think hopefully I'll remember that question from the beginning to the end, because there's so much I want to share with you. So be patient with me. But I think what I'd like to share with you is sort of my beginning, and then where I was, and then kind of we'll catapult into the future. So, excuse me. I'm a lawyer. I was a lawyer in South Africa. We emigrated. I became a lawyer in Canada. So I think, most students, when they decide that they want to study law, most of us do it because we want to serve. There's this calling inside of us that says, and it's a calling. We are called to the bar. We don't become a lawyer. We're called to be a lawyer. It's a calling. And so there's something inside of us that we're called to be a lawyer. And most times I don't think it's about money. When you want to be a lawyer, you think about how you're going to help, how you're going to make change. So I had that naive belief that I was going to be, the female knight on the horse. I was going to come in and I was going to save the world and save the people who need saving and do all of that. And so I became a lawyer in South Africa, but I was very young. And I did kind of what I was told to do. I dressed the way society expected me to dress, and I behaved the way society expected lawyers to behave, and the values of who I was as a person and why I was called to be a lawyer, I kind of strayed a little bit from them because the law told me to stray from them. And so I was very, very disillusioned as a lawyer. It was like, I didn't sign up for this. This isn't why I wanted to become a lawyer. So when we emigrated, I said to my husband, I'm not going to be a lawyer anymore. I'm done. I kind of felt that I'd sold my soul to the devil, and the devil had taken over, and this wasn't what I wanted. And I thought, woohoo, we'll immigrate. I'll have a whole new career. It will be this wonderful opportunity for me to reinvent myself. And so we were in Canada about 2 years, and I realized that I actually, maybe a bit less, maybe 18 months, and I realized I actually missed the law, and I missed being a lawyer, and it was in my blood, and I wanted to be a lawyer. But I decided that because I'd been given a second opportunity, I was going to reclaim my soul back, and that I was now older, and I was going to practice law the way I wanted to practice law, and I was going to do it my way, and I wasn't going to be swayed by anything that this is what you should be, to put that guard on, and that shield, and all that nonsense. So I did. I converted my law degree. I did all the stuff that I had to do, but I made a commitment to myself that I was not going to litigate, and I was not going to stray from my moral compass, and that if it meant I only had 5 clients, then I would give those 5 clients my everything. But I was very, very, very clear with the vision that I had for how I was going to practice. And I was very fortunate that I had a very successful practice. I loved 99.9% of my clients. Most of them I got on really, really well with. And I never litigated. I never went to court, and I practiced family law, but I also practiced fertility law. So I was very specific with how I practiced, who my clients were. I didn't take every single client. If I didn't feel that we resonated, I would refer them to other lawyers. And the only time I went to court was I was an agent for the Office of the Children's Lawyer, which is I advocated for children whose parents were either going through very high conflict divorces, or if they had been apprehended by Children's Aid, then I was their voice in the courtroom. So that's the only time I went to court. And fortunately for me, that was where I really could be compassionate, and I could actually bring compassion to the courthouse and to the parents. So it was a very beautiful segue for me to be who I was. So that was kind of my story with how I practiced law, but I still kind of was not embracing all of me, because I was a Reiki master, and I do believe in energy, and I kind of still put those things to the side. It was like, oh, my friends know I'm a Reiki master, and my friends know that I'll give them a crystal, but I would never tell clients or other colleagues that I'm a little bit woo-woo,
Yes.
And then one day I thought, why not? Like, if I can't accept whole of me as being perfect, then how can I want the world to accept me in all that I am? So in 2018, I called myself the transformational lawyer, because I actually embraced all of that. And so I put on my website, I'm a Reiki master. I believe in crystals. I believe in energy. I'll Reiki your file. Like, I'll do all of those things. And I brought it in, and it didn't stop my practice from going any further. And for me, I really embraced everything about me, and I put all of those modalities in. And then I did coach, and I did talk to my clients about mindfulness, and we would do a meditation if I saw that they were really getting triggered, or we were going into a meeting. So I embraced everything about me, and it worked out perfectly. It made no difference other than I was showing up authentically, my true 100% self, and there was no, people's, at the office, I was known as I would often I would burn sage in my office, and we had this one male law clerk, and you'd go, oh, Nicole's blazing again, but but it was just, that was it. She was just blazing again. Like, that was, I'll get to smell sage for 2 hours, completely accepted. And I think when we can accept all of us and shine from within out, people have to accept it, because we're unapologetic about it.
So true. And so much of what you have shared has resonated with me and my story. And I'm so grateful for this opportunity to speak with you, because it's giving me hope, I'll say, on so many different levels. And especially with kind of where we're going now. Like, there are many more of us out there that are licensed to practice law, that, like you said, chose to come into service, but then the system pigeonholed us in what we were told should be and isn't aligned. And so I'm seeing the emergence of these other people that are looking, how can we do this differently? So what is your experience with these, the metamorphosis that is occurring, the people that are finding ways to do law and legal support differently? Like, what are you seeing?
First of all, people often say, oh, the system is broken, and I don't think the legal system is broken. Because when something is broken, it means very often if it gets fixed, it's not going to be as good. Or if it's broken, we discard it because there's no use left for it. So I don't think the legal system is broken. There are many, many parts of the legal system that work absolutely beautiful. I think the legal system is wounded. And what happens is hurt people hurt. So when you're wounded and somebody pokes at you, you're going to get defensive and you're going to get aggressive because hurt people hurt. So the legal system, in my opinion, is wounded and it's hurting. So we have to heal the legal system. And how we do that is we take all the good parts and we say, we want to evolve. Let's see what's already here that is really, really good. And let's evolve it. Let's make that better. Because what happens then is all the bad stuff we haven't rejected, but it gets filtered out. And eventually it's of no use anymore because it's filtered out. But we never ever once said, we don't like you, we don't want you. We just collectively evolve and we collectively use what is useful. And for me, that's how we can come together as community, because we're not, our legal system here is so hierarchical. We've got judges, we've got lawyers, we've got senior lawyers, we've got, and you got the poor, for me, I think one of the most important people in the legal system are the support staff that no one ever thanks or thinks about, or without them, the system would not run at all,
Yes.
So I really think we have to start thinking not hierarchically. We have to start thinking as a whole, where each of us, almost like it's like this nucleus where, and for me, in this nucleus of the legal system, the pulse and the heart of the public, they're the heart of the legal system. On the outside are the helpers and the healers. And so what we do is we bounce in and out saying, well, what does the public need? And then we'll bounce in and we'll do it and we'll bounce out. But we have to speak and understand what the heart needs. And the public, most often we don't listen to what the public needs. We say, we'll tell you because we know your life better than you do, according to section whatever of rule, whatever. It's ridiculous. Public don't care about that, and so for me, I think where we can evolutionize the system is to stop saying it's broken and to say, how can we heal? And how can all the healers, let's bring all the healers together from every modality. And we shouldn't silo everything. We've got the legal fraternity is siloed and the mental health fraternity is siloed and the decision makers are siloed. And, but what if we break that down and we all work together so that we can create a system that takes into account pure healing and growth and evolution?
Yes.
I think I answered your question.
Yes. And that's actually ties into when I learned about collaborative law. I was like, oh my goodness, there is this modality that, to your point, brings all the pieces together to give people information, be able to make conscious choices, to take a step back and not be reacting out of that hurt, but be able to say, okay, I want to be in a good place 1 year, 5 years, 10 years down the road that is in alignment with me. And here are the tools and the people that can help me get there, be it in a business relationship or a family relationship. And, that integration of all of those tools. When I saw that was literally the teacher that was overseeing this conference. When I was walking out the last day, he was like, Janelle, there's a light in your eyes that wasn't here when we started. And I was just like, the sun started all of a sudden opened up in the sky and shone through. And I was like, there's hope. And when you see that in potential clients, that they get to feel hope again versus that anxiety of going into the fight. And I love how you said about the legal community needing to be healed and it's not broken. I love that perspective. So thank you. Because I agree.
And I like one thing that I want to share with you, because I resonate so beautifully with you, is when I decided that I wanted to be a lawyer in Canada, and I decided that I was going to open up my own practice, because the lawyer that I worked for, I always felt like a triangle in a round pigeonhole. Like I didn't fit it, like, and he asked me 3 or 4 times to stay with different things. I was like, I can't, I have to be my own lawyer. Like I just can't do it. And so when I opened up my own practice, and I was thinking, well, how am I going to do this? Like, how am I going to stay true to my values? Is I learned about collaborative law. So this was in about 2008. And the trainings were very few and far between. And so I learned about collaborative law, and I contacted the Collaborative Practice Toronto, and I said, all right, I want to do the training. When is it? She said, oh, it's like only in June. And this was in like February and I was like, June? Well, that doesn't help me. And then when's the second one? It was like, that doesn't help me. I want to practice now, And so when I realized that it was only going to happen then, I became a mediator. So I thought, okay, well, if I can't practice collaboratively, I'll be a mediator. So I actually did my mediation training, literally waiting for the collaborative training to take place. So I became a mediator before I became a collaborative practitioner. But that whole way of being, I used to call it, and I still do call it, that it's a real holistic way of practicing, and not holistic, HOLISTIC, but whole, as WHOLE, because we take the whole person and the whole family and the whole system and the whole support group, and we allow this family to transform, because they go through transition. So I only had a collaborative practice and a mediation practice. So I completely understand what you said when the light shone out of you, because suddenly you think, I'm home. Yes. I'm home. Yeah, completely resonate with how you felt.
Yeah, it's such an amazing thing. And I wish I look forward to, let me rephrase that. I look forward to the time where people think about collaborative law before they think about litigation. Mm-hmm. When they think about doing things consciously and slowly versus the default of, I'm mad at you, this didn't go the way I expected, I'm taking you to court. That the steps that are available, that they realize there's so many more things available than going that route. Excuse me, kind of like mediation. I too started with mediation training, and actually started training people in mediation as well. And then, found collaborative law and became certified and took those trainings, and was like, it just merged so seamlessly together, and it is all integral to it. So if you could wave your magic wand, what would you see for the legal community, for the people who are trying to become healers in law?
Beautiful question. Thank you. First of all, I think that we have to have an understanding we have to be not just trauma informed, we have to be trauma aware and trauma responsive. We have to recognize when our own triggers when we're being triggered. We have to recognize when our biases are showing up, because I don't think we can truly serve if we're not aware of what's going on inside of us at any given time. And, we talk about, when you say, oh, your trauma affects how you are in the world, people always think trauma as being, oh, but I wasn't sexually abused, or I had a fantastic family, or I didn't have a car accident. Like, people think of these huge, big T traumas. And that's not what I'm talking about. It's the small T traumas. It's those small little things like, for me, if you were the last in a family of very loud people and you were the baby, then you always considered the baby. And if you really had to raise your voice because else you weren't heard, well, if now you're a lawyer and you're sitting in a room and you feel like you're being ignored, you get triggered and now you become loud and obnoxious. Okay. Now, if you don't unaware that that's because your little person inside of you is going, whoa, they're ignoring me, and having a temper tantrum. If you're not aware of that programming, it's going to affect how you serve your clients. So, for me, we have to be trauma informed, trauma aware, trauma responsive of our own programming and issues. And then we have to be able to recognize that in our clients. So when our clients are suddenly looking around and they're not paying attention, and you've said the same thing 4 times to them, and it doesn't look like they're paying attention, and you're getting angry with them, maybe it's because they've been triggered, and maybe it's because they're in fight, flight, freeze, and they actually cannot focus on you and bombarding them with legal information. So what do you do in that situation? You have to know how to go and regulate your client. You have to be able to recognize all of these things happening. So for me, trauma is probably the first thing that the legal system has to acknowledge and teach. So that's the first thing. And what was the rest of the question? You see, I'm like a bird. I just get distracted so quickly.
I call it tangent talking, and I love it. Like, it's just like, let's follow the tangents and we'll get to where we need to go ultimately. I guess also, so we've waved the magic wand. Attorneys are starting to become more trauma aware, trauma informed, responsive, and are able to hold space appropriately for themselves and their clients.
Yeah.
How can you see that rippling out to the world?
Yes, that was the question. So I think this is one of the things that I say, that I'm an advocate for changing the legal narrative. And what I mean by that is, first of all, we as lawyers have to start changing our narrative. We also have to start changing the way we speak, start changing the way we represent ourselves. We have to allow emotion to come in. We have to be transparent, and we have to be authentic, without a doubt. Like that's what I believe. And so I think this is how we can start. And for me, I can only ever speak for me. For me, it's about bringing compassion and kindness into the law. And there are many, many ways that we can bring compassion and kindness into the law. And my byline, I've been saying it for months and months now, because it really is who I am now, is I do believe in a world where compassion and kindness are greater than fear and hatred. So our legal system is based in fear and hatred. And so what we have to do is break down the fear and hatred and the woundedness and the hurt, and bring in compassion and kindness. And we have to, as lawyers and as our clients, we have to stop judging people by the chapter we find them on when they come to us. There's a whole story with a whole bunch of other chapters. And just because we only know them in chapter 9 doesn't mean there was chapters 1 to 8, and actually there's chapters 10 to 20. And so we have to see the whole. And this is what the law needs to do, is stop focusing on, law is so narrow-minded, right? The focus becomes so narrow-minded that we don't see people as people. And for me, that's what has to change. And when that can change, our legal system will evolve. And the public will trust the legal system, because they're not going to be harmed by the legal system.
Yeah. I'm again getting full body chills, which just is a fantastic sign for me. And I love that perspective, because people are so much more than we ever see in that moment, in that snapshot of time. And that fear of power over and power with, and not knowing how to, be in power with. So it's not a typical place to be, even from childhood. Parents have authority over the child, and everything has been so hierarchical that a lot of people are just programmed to see who has power. If I don't have power, how do I get power?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how the legal system was built, to maintain that power structure, and to realize it's could be so much more, and not about power at all, but about cooperation and compassion and kindness and co-creation of things that could be so much better.
Yeah, what I'm about to tell you now is completely my opinion, my ideas. It's anecdotal. It's not based on statistics. It's not even based on research or much going back in time to research it. Okay, it's just like, this is what I believe from my core. And I believe that when thousands and thousands of years ago, when people lived in tribes, what would happen? There would be an argument between two neighbors, and they couldn't figure it out between themselves, and they had to go speak to a chief. But they knew that if one of them was a really good orator and the other one wasn't a great orator, then things might not resolve in the way that they wanted to. So they would go to friends and say, you speak really, really well. If I tell you my story, will you be able to translate my story and present it to the wise man? And the person said, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And that's how lawyers came about, because they heard the stories, because they were really good orators. They were good with words. They were good with storytelling. They came and they presented the different sides to the wise man. Okay. And that's kind of how lawyers started. And it worked really, really well. And then the chief would say, okay, here's some rules. Let's say, if you know the rules, then you might be able to share that with the people, so I don't have to deal with the nonsense when you come to me. And that's kind of what happened. And then law school came and universities came, and they said, you have to advocate and you have to take sides and you have to do all of these things. And they said, and don't worry about emotions, because that the healers will deal with, right? And that's where this legal system started coming from, because I believe that many thousands of years ago, the people who were called to be lawyers were the people who were blessed with skills of communication. And then law school screwed it all over.
I can't argue with that at all. That would make a lot of sense.
So we now have to go to law, like the change and the evolution in law actually means we have to bring this integrative law. We have to bring in this change maker thinking, this healer thinking, this helper thinking. We have to go back to ground zero, to universities, to say we need a whole new understanding of what it means to be a lawyer. And it's happening, because at the rate of burnout, and lawyers have overtaken dentists in suicide rates and in, taking narcotics or alcohol. We aren't coping. So something isn't working.
Agreed. So how have you found, because like you said, you're a Reiki master, the energy healing, you became certified in mindfulness. If you could give anybody, but more specifically lawyers, a tip or trick, what would you recommend? Like a quick tip that they could do to tap into that mindfulness to maybe help them through some of these challenging times?
Well, I think we have to first have an understanding of what mindfulness is, So mindfulness isn't this sustained long way of being, right? So mindfulness isn't meditation. We've got a mindful meditation, but mindfulness isn't meditation. And I find in the West, sometimes people think that meditation is mindfulness. So if you say, oh, you should, think about doing mindfulness, they go, oh, meditation is not for me, right? It's so they're two completely different things all together. Meditation is one small part of mindfulness. Mindfulness is this huge big umbrella. So for me, how I describe mindfulness is it's a momentary experience. It's very brief, it's very quick, it doesn't last long. And all mindfulness is, it's knowing what your body and mind is doing at any given moment. So no, but like right now, I'm very mindful. I'm very aware that I'm talking and my tongue is touching the top of my palate, and then it touches the bottom of, I've got a wire in my mouth, so I can always feel it's touching the wire. That's happening in real time. I'm very aware of that happening. Mindfulness of the mind happens after the fact. So that happens when suddenly you think, oh wow, I've just been thinking about how much I hate my partner, or I've just been dwelling in judgment and self-loathing, or I've just been relishing how much I'm enjoying my latte. So mindfulness of moment happens after the fact, but the mindfulness is that top of awareness going, oh wow, I'm just suddenly aware of what's happening right now in this moment. So that's what mindfulness is. So I often will say to clients who are coming to me that I offer everyday mindfulness. So how do you cope when that email comes in from that one lawyer who just grinds you the wrong way, or where the telephone rings and your heart jumps out of your chest because like, oh, is that the judge saying I have to be at the courthouse? That's what mindfulness is. It's suddenly where I'm not saying my heart is beating. Oh, have you heard of the term email apnea?
No.
So email apnea is when you get an email and you look and you go, and you actually catch your breath and you don't breathe for a moment. And very often that happens when it's an email from somebody you don't like or don't want, or you've been waiting for, and that we don't even realize that we've actually stopped breathing. And so if you suffer from email apnea, you possibly stop breathing every 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's what mindfulness is. It's suddenly just being aware of what's happening right now in this moment in my body or in my thoughts. Where am I in my thoughts? And that's noticing that you're believing a story that you've created in your own mind. And then you start adding all the little herbs and spices and getting angry and having, I mean, I put my hand up how many arguments I've had with somebody and they don't even know I'm arguing with them. It's like, oh, the next time I see them, I just want to see how this argument plays out in my mind, and you just got so angry with them and you don't realize that when you see them the next time, your mind goes, oh, I'll be angry with them, Yeah. So for me, that's what mindfulness is.
That's beautiful. And that makes a lot of sense. And you're right. A lot of people have correlated meditation and mindfulness. And a lot of people, to your point, are like, oh, I can't do the meditation thing. My mind wanders too much. There's all these reasons it doesn't work. And if you can just take it that moment to moment, even if it's for 30 seconds, just quieting and focusing, to your point of being mindful of the moment. And then if, in time, you can make that a practice, but just making that mindful moment a part of your awareness.
Yeah. Yeah. So, to go back to your, is there one thing, easy tip that I can offer lawyers or anybody else? I mean, there's so many tips, but if your email does have a ping, if your email pings when it comes in, you can make that your mindful awareness bell. So if you've gotten a ping 30 times a day or however many times, if that's your tool, then what you do is when it pings, and instead of just quickly opening it, just say, I'm going to take 3 deep breaths. And that's going to force you, because mindfulness is a practice. It's a habit. Mindfulness isn't an expert. We call it a practice because every day is an opportunity to practice. But it's a habit, and we have to attend to it every single moment that we get an opportunity to attend to it. And mindfulness is simple. It just isn't easy.
No.
So an easy tip is like when you're suddenly noticing that you feeling anxious, or your heart is pounding, or just literally just to stop, close your eyes and just take 3 deep breaths and just change the energy of how you're feeling in that moment. Or another tip that I say to my clients, is just touch your fingertips. No one can even know you're doing. You can do it under the table, but these are very sensitive parts of our body. And so what happens when you notice that you're going to get triggered is if you start just focusing your attention, like if you even just do it now and you focus your attention on this, it's actually very hard to think at the same time, because you're focusing your attention on this. So when you're feeling overwhelmed or triggered, what you need to do is take your attention away from here and bring it towards your body. And that's one very simple technique of doing that, because your mind actually can't multitask. We think we can. We rely on our senses to cobble everything together. But actually, it can only focus on one thing at a time. And like a good example I'll give you, have you ever been to like a Cirque du Soleil concert where it's or it's a meal and a thing? So it's it's a show and a meal. Okay, so when you go to these things, I've been to two of them. They were the most frustrating things I've ever been to. Okay, because what happened is when I stopped to take my focus on cutting my food, it was like, oh, everyone missed, it's so the most brilliant thing, and I missed it because I was cutting my food. And then when you're actually watching the beautiful show, you're not even tasting your food. So what's the point? You pay this expensive, ticket to have a brilliant meal and a show, but you actually can only do one thing at a time. You can't do them together. And so that's what mindfulness teaches us, is that if you're going to enjoy your food, enjoy your food. And if you're going to want to watch a show, but you can't do both at the same time successfully. Your brain tricks you into thinking that it can put it all together, but it can only focus on one thing at a time.
I love that explanation, because I've heard, for weight loss, make sure you don't eat watching TV and things like that. And there's a certain level of, okay, that makes sense, because you just get focused on, the TV show or whatever. But hearing it in that capacity gives that, awareness to the disconnect that actually is in fact there, that, to your point, we don't necessarily pay attention. If we're sitting there watching TV and eating, we're technically multitasking, but we're not actually paying attention to one or the other. And unless you stop and go, oh, all my food's gone and I don't remember eating it, you don't realize.
Yeah.
And so having kind of those special events where you both mean something to you and you're not able to experience it, fully, you get to make a choice. And recognizing, and this is one of the things that has been a very poignant to me over the last year, is the choices we get to make, how much more choice we have in life.
Mm-hmm.
And it is as simple as just taking that moment and enjoying whatever the meal is, or enjoying the show, or enjoying, like you said, the sensation in your hands, or the sun on your skin, even for that just brief moment.
Yeah.
It's always a choice.
Oh, and mindfulness, I always say what mindfulness does is it gives you choice. Because what mindfulness does is it suddenly brings space. And it says, okay, I've just given you a little bit of space to make an appropriate next step. So how do you want to do it? Do you want to respond in the next moment, or do you want to react in the next moment? Mindfulness is non-judgmental. Mindfulness doesn't care what you do. It's just an awareness. But it says, okay, I've made you aware of how you're feeling in this moment. We've created that little bit of space. So how do you want to show up in the next moment? You've got a choice now.
Yes, that's beautiful and so needed. Recently working with a Conscious Contracts colleague, and she has introduced to me the taking a pause, and doing it more consciously in connection with people I'm working with myself. And, while it's talked about so often, just, take a breath and do this, it's said in such a just almost dismissive way. I don't know if that's the right word, but when to your point earlier of saying it's easy, or how did you put it? It's simple, but it's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
And the complexity of that. And especially for, I believe, people who are in intellectual positions like lawyers, that we have so much validation in our minds and how quickly can move and how critically we can think and how we can logistically figure things out that, most people can't in our perspectives, and, the ego part of being a lawyer, and realizing that if we just took that pause, that mindful moment, and took account of our energy and our body and that choice that we get to make in the next moment.
Yeah, that's so poignant and deep, like what you've said, because I think being a lawyer is a very ego-driven career, unfortunately, because it's, I for whatever reason, it's a very ego driven, and we have such imposter syndrome. Everybody's better than us. If anybody actually found out that I didn't know all of these rules off by heart, they're going to think I don't know my job. I can't answer my client like this. They're going to think I'm an idiot, and they're going to go to the next lawyer. So it is such a fear driven and ego driven profession. But the one thing I know for sure is that, like, I agree with you that we can think quickly on our feet and we can do all of these things. But what I know is that the ego wants instant attention. It wants instant gratification. It wants it wants constant validation. It wants, and it's loud and it's abusive. So if it can't get what it wants from you, then it desperately claws at trying to do something else to get that validation. But the thing is, we've all got this intuitive wisdom. Like, we've got the answers to every single thing lies in front of us, but wisdom does not argue with anyone. And it certainly won't argue with the ego. So what wisdom says, it says, when you're quiet and you want to take some time to have a conversation with me, I'm here, but I don't shout and I don't argue. So if you want to listen to the ego, be my guest. I'll be here when you're ready. And that's why listen and silent have got the same letters, because it's only when you're silent you can listen, and you can only listen when you're silent, because our wisdom is intuitively inside of us. But we're constantly listening to the loud ego that's bringing us down the whole time. Because if you take time to listen to your true inner wisdom, it's going to say, God, you're beautiful. So glad you've come to have a conversation. Where have you been? I've been waiting for you. But we never take that pause, and we never take time to go within and reflect and contemplate. And that's what, as lawyers, we should be doing all the time.
Yes. Wow. Thank you. I just, and this can apply, I guess I also, point of the podcast is so that people see that there's other ways for their healing journey. And part of the reason I wanted so desperately to have this episode with you is for people to recognize and see that there are healers out there, that are lawyers that are healers. There are people that are looking for a healthier, more holistic approach to supporting them through a system that is currently hurting. And especially when they're hurting as well. And because usually you don't come to the legal system feeling ready to roll and best, like you just came out of, vacation and you're ready to go. You're usually not feeling so good on some level yourself if you're entering into the system. So that there are, people, many more than I ever even imagined, people like us out there that are healers in law. And also, these are skills and these are approaches that are and can be put into corporations, into everyday life. And it can, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of soak into the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. And because lawyers are looked at in a certain light. And if we can do it, so can everyone else in these power over type of relationships. And I want and I hope that people will take that pause, when they see this or hear our podcast and go, how can I be a part of that movement?
Yeah. And I think, Janelle, when we think about corporate and we think about higher up positions, for me, it's all about empathetic leadership. And empathetic leadership means I understand you and I see you and I recognize and I want to support you. That's what empathetic leadership is about, And so even just small words, if I say to you, yeah, Janelle, I'm listening to you, or I say to you, yeah, Janelle, I hear you, which one do you feel more supported by? Because when I hear you, it means I'm hearing what's on your chest. I'm listening to you means my ears are hearing the words that are going in, but I hear you means my heart is responding to what you're saying. And I think all people in my experience, sort of in a corporate world, people want to be heard, seen, and understood, either in your position of power or your position of non-power, as an employee. And when people are going through transition, in my experience, all they want is acknowledgement or an apology. They either want to be acknowledged for what they brought to a marriage or they brought to a relationship, or they want an apology by someone saying, I'm so sorry this happened. And when people get those two things, apologizing isn't a bad thing, but the law makes an apology a bad thing. The law says if you apologize, you're taking blame. And don't ever take blame for anything, because then you've lost, But if the law can say, well, let's just have that apology. You don't have to apologize for everything. But if I apologized for hurting you in some way that was either intentional or unintentional, I'm really sorry. And I acknowledge that my actions hurt you. That doesn't mean you've taken the blame for anything. And that, once people see that and they understand and they feel heard and acknowledged, that's when you can start having non-violent communication. That's when you can start healing. That's when you can start looking at conflict in a different way. And the law is really the only sort of area where we're actually able to do that. We're actually able to heal relationships. We're actually able to create and sustain and maintain good relationships with conscious contracts, where our values steer the agreement rather than the agreement steering our action. I mean, that's ridiculous. But that's what the law has said. We'll tell you how you're going to be punished so that you behave the way I'm telling you to behave. Whereas if you understand my values and you understand who I am, you're never ever going to disrespect that agreement, because we're on the same page. The value is leading our relationship together. And I know I'm preaching to the converted, but the law is the one discipline where we're able to do all of that. And we shouldn't be siloed the way that we have been.
You're right. You're right. And having that space and capacity to teach people to take that choice and connection and control, because what a lot of people I don't think realize is that when they enter into a contract, or that ultimately the people can make their own laws in that contract. They can have that power to create whatever world they would like, as long as it's not harming anybody else. That is, and especially when it is driven with values and heart and connection and co-creation, they have that ability. And the way law has, come to be, it's like you said, I will tell you how to act and how to protect yourself, and to work in a realm to how to I cover my hiney in this process, versus how do we create a world that everybody's hiney is, grown and covered and perfect, and, in however we could imagine that being. And that's one of the things that I'm so excited about with conscious contracts, and with when lawyers realize that they can think outside the box that we've been given.
Mm-hmm.
and start drawing outside the lines. And what would they draw? Like, I'm so curious to see what will grow from that when they start seeing that choice.
And I don't think it's up to the lawyers to draw. I think it's up to the lawyers to take direction for the people who are asking them to help them create an agreement that values the people who are asking for help with that agreement. So often people feel so powerless because they're too scared to say to their lawyer, I don't understand the agreement, or most of us, that's a template. It's generic, it's like, really, my life is just generic. I don't understand what you've put in this agreement that you're telling me, so I think lawyers have to get over themselves.
Yes.
And if a client says to you, I want this, you go, okay, I let me see how I can make it lawful. Let me see how we can get other people to accept what's important to you. And not tell people what's good for them. And put the fear of God into people because they're so scared that I'm going to breach the agreement and then I'm going to be hauled into court.
You're right. And it's more like the attorney is giving them the open, clear notepad with the 64 box of color crayons and say, here, have fun, create. And then we'll figure out how to make this, into reality.
Yeah. And I think the thing is, I get that if it's not if you've got a contract full of pictures, and graphics, maybe courts wouldn't like it, but it should come to a point where courts do like it. And the court said, this is a 3-page graphic. Explain it to me so I can understand what is important to this family. I mean, that's maybe way in the future. Maybe that will happen, but so I get that lawyers are saying we still have to make it enforceable. But at the end of the day, the fact is that if you and I have put our hearts and soul into an agreement and I've completely heard you and understood you, the chances are we're never going to court. The chances are we're going to have a difficult conversation to figure out, because before we even get to the difficult conversation, we are going to have something in the agreement that says, when I start avoiding your telephone calls, that's a signal for you to know I'm upset, but I'm avoiding I'm avoiding a conversation. Oh, okay. So we're going to put in the agreement, how do we recognize when we're being triggered? What do I need? What is the best form of communication? And we won't even need courts.
Yep. And going through that conscious contracts process, exploring those sides of us that we don't necessarily stop to think about. That, again, going back to the mindfulness, it gives you questions and concepts that people don't take a moment and go, when am I triggered? In this type of relationship, this type of partnership, how have I found I show up and don't show up? And, I kind of have ADD, so I'm not responding to you. You may want to touch base and ask the question, do I need, are you okay? Are you in the middle of something, or are you upset with me? Because I don't want you telling yourself the narrative that I am upset if I'm just in hyper focus and, off in my own little world. And being able to communicate to set that understanding and expectation so that those narratives, that abandonment narrative, or that, little t trauma that you talked about earlier, that's getting triggered in me, that I might be like, oh, I need to figure out how to fix it. There might not be anything that I need to fix, because that person's just going on with their life and it has nothing to do with me in this moment.
Yeah.
And realizing we're all, co-creating in that way and interacting. That's one of the things I find so beautiful about this process, is the self-evaluation awareness that it helps to bring. Yeah. Now, do you have any examples or ahas that you or your clients have had while working with them that you just think kind of encapsulates the beauty of that approach?
Yeah, so many. But I think one of my greatest success stories was working with a lawyer, with a client. She was attending my mindfulness classes. And she came to me the one week and she said, Nicolle, I was on a telephone call with another lawyer and she started getting personal with me. And I was just about to get personal back because that's how I did things. And I suddenly was aware of there was so much anger inside of me. And I stopped and I said to this lawyer, you know what, I think this might be a good time for us to end the conversation. Can I connect with you tomorrow? And she said, I stopped the telephone call. And she said, in the past, I would never have actually known that I was contributing to that situation. And for me, when I have clients saying, I didn't contribute anymore, I didn't make a negative situation any, because I there's one small but lofty goal I give all my students. The small but lofty goal is don't contribute anymore to a negative situation. At best, leave it as it is. If you can't improve it, leave it as it is. And she said to me, I did my lofty goal. I didn't make it worse. I didn't make it better. I just left it. And she said, but I did make it better because the next day when I called her, I collected my thoughts. I knew it wasn't personal. And I started the conversation off from a much better place. And so for me, that's what mindfulness is all about. It's don't contribute to any negative situation. See how you can make it better, or at least leave it alone. And so for me, that's a huge success. When people can come to me with that and say, I suddenly had awareness, I had control over my next step, huge success.
That is fantastic. And you're correct. You're completely correct. It's how much of us just go with that habitual programming and habitual responses that we don't realize how we are doing that dance, and that mindfulness is so important. That's gorgeous. So we are getting close to time. If you could give one message to the audience with one thing, kind of seed to plant, what would you want them to think about?
Be kind. That's it.
Beautiful. So if anybody wanted to reach out to you and contact you, how would they find you?
So I have a website. So it's www.lotus-law.com. And then my email address is Nicolle@lotus-law.com as well. And I do have a book if people want to learn a little bit more about mindfulness as well. So they can... if you don't mind me plugging it, because I happen to have
it. Please go right ahead.
Get it on Amazon. They can get it on Amazon. So it's Insights for Everyday Mindfulness. They can find it on Amazon. And basically what it is, it's 52 mindfulness lessons. So you can just grab a page. There's sort of the lesson on a sort of a quote or a parable on the one side and a lesson on that side. And it's a great resource to have if you just want something to guide you for the day or for the week. So I'm really excited about that book.
Beautiful. Well, thank you. And I will definitely also put the link in the YouTube description so that people can find it as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this time, Nicolle. I have enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, me too. Thank you so much for allowing me to chat to you and talk about what I love most in the world, which is being a healer in law.
Thank you.